just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. Hey, Nick. Back for another episode.
Hey Josh, so we are. What's been great today for you?
I flew back early in the morning back to my home base here in Charlotte, and I had a couple of great connections today. I think it's just a reminder for me of, it's just another example of the lifestyle I've created for myself. The coaching that I'm doing, and I get to do it from anywhere. So I was up in New York for a few days and having some fun with some friends. I got some coaching in while staying with family, and then also got coaching in the day that I traveled. So I don't know, it just feels good to be productive while also enjoying the fruits of being able to travel and experience life in other ways.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to just be on the other side of the focus and like no work in any particular day. But you can have much more flexibility if you can combine the two. I mean, there's definitely times we need to be out and switched off in that way, so you can access different parts of you. But yeah, it's better to do that. Even when I was in London the other week, the first day I got there, I had like 3 coaching calls in the afternoon. For me, it's kind of like, when they say you travel a lot, the first thing you should do is have a workout, regardless of the time, just to reset yourself. Felt like that a little bit. It's like reset my mind, and yes, I think it's a good distinction to make. When you think of that lifestyle that you've built for yourself, how would you describe that?
I feel like I'm prepared to answer this. I'd call it work-life integration.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I feel prepared for that is because I just had this conversation with somebody else earlier this week. Because I think work-life balance feels like a buzzword. Like, what is it? There's no such thing as balance, right? It's always swinging in one direction or the other. Integration, I feel like I can, and I am myself in all facets of my life.
Yeah.
I used to feel like I had to come off a certain way or be polished in a certain way or present myself a certain way to clientele or prospects. And that may still also be the case with coaching, but I feel like the more I embrace my own authenticity and reject who I think I should be substituted for who I am, it just feels better to me. So that's the biggest trade-off for this lifestyle is being my authentic self more often.
I feel that this work-life integration came up a long time ago, a distinction that perhaps you spent some time with someone and shared, but I haven't thought about it for a while. And yeah, like, because there's no balance to be had. It's always out of balance. It's like, where's the right counterbalance or that dynamic equilibrium, as we call it? It's never done. It's always the tension. It's not one right thing. It's always, where do you need to be along the line to make sure that the seesaw is balanced, right? Like that is where it is not balanced, but where it needs to be right in that moment. And that's a great distinction for me. In the nuance of it is that I haven't got to get ready for this part of my life because I just show up as who I am. But then you qualify that a little bit by saying, well, sometimes I need to do that in coaching. I'd like to play in that space for a second, if we may. Do you feel that is because I can definitely see arguments for what that means? 'Cause I don't think that it's a slight against being authentic if in certain circumstances you want to show up in a certain way. It just shows me you want to authentically show up in that way versus like, how do you feel, or like, is it really you? Not the same thing. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess what pops into my mind first is a client of mine that I have as a school district. right? And there's certain decorum that might come with interacting with education professionals. But even as I'm saying this, I'm also thinking there's still people too, and they have the need to act authentically in their roles and what they're doing. There just seems to be, I guess it's just more of an awareness of it. I'm able to catch myself, oh, that's happening right now. Uh, Less about judgment of like, oh, it's a good or a bad thing, or I shouldn't be doing that. It's just like, oh, that, I'm noticing myself doing that. And I think that that is the win for me, not necessarily taking any action from it, but just thinking about what that means for me. And it means different things in different settings, I think.
Yeah. Right. Because how you show up on your boy's golf trip is probably not how you show up to a client call, but it's still
Right.
you. Both of those are still authentically you.
Yes.
Perhaps the malignment would be if you were showing up in your profession and you could test check it by the energy. I've certainly got reference to this in previous life that it's not. It feels like it's such a big drain of energy that you are pushing yourself to be something of you in that moment, but it really doesn't feel like that. It really should be. Just so I think there's a real like fine line between that. Like you can show up and be that person, but if it's not who you want to be in the long term, then it will drain you of energy. Are you with me?
Yeah.
If it's like what? So there's if you show up in your coaching call, it gives you energy, and you show up to play golf, that might give you energy as well. But I mean, there's going to be overlaps where you appear to be the same person. Like, I mean, you got to talk to your brother and your friends about like cool shit that we talk about here, or to your clients. You're not
Mhm.
working, right? Maybe that's it. It's like, yeah, I can't quite
Yeah. I
do
mean,
this.
it's probably around that, around, I'm being paid for this. This is my profession. And so therefore it kind of has all these other things attached to it, for better or for worse. I think there's some good parts about that. I wonder what that is. Like why, it feels like it's so deeply ingrained. So maybe that's what it is. Just our perspectives of growing up, and there's a theory that the education system, at least in the United States, is like a preparation for working for an employer and obeying an authority figure. I always think about that. So when we transition into the professional world and into corporate America, corporate wherever, um, there's probably some of that belief system in there because that's what we've seen as we grow up.
Yeah,
And so there's some of that like stickiness still, even as we make transitions into careers that we really are passionate about. Um, but there's still elements of that kind of like what I said earlier, just being aware of it, I think is the first step. And then understanding how to integrate, which is how I started, integrate that more with everything that I do. I would say I've made a lot of progress with just, I don't feel inauthentic in anything that I do.
yeah,
I don't know if I would have been able to say that in the start of my coaching career. Thought I had to be somebody different or somebody elevated.
yeah. I'm with you. I get it. It's hard. I think it's a challenging one for me to really put my finger on. Maybe because that's not what the answer is to do. The only example that I always come back to here is Joe Rogan in the UFC. He used to do all those UFC events and then like stopped doing everything apart from doing all the traveling. Just did the pay per views in North America because he said, "I love this. I love it. I'm a fanatic. I love this stuff, and it's work. I got to do all the research. I got to know well, most of it, and perhaps it's not a lot of work because most of it he knows anyway. He's following it because he loves it. He's got to make sure he's on point. Who's coming up next? What are the most recent stats? Like there's commentary you could add to it as you watch it, but there's a difference between knowing all of those different things specifically to be able to share and having to produce it in that moment, rather than just sitting there with your mates going, "This guy got knocked out in the last fight. I want to see how he's going to turn up today." It's a little bit different. Maybe that's it. Just the sharpness.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're onto something there, and I think that's what feels more natural to me is like I want to do this work, whereas my previous sales positions, not that I didn't want to do it, but it was like it felt like something I had to do. And this, like everything we do, is around success or helping other people be more successful. And we've established a connection, whether it's our first call with a new client or someone we've been working with for years, that we care about these people. You know, we kind of have our own selection process with who we work with, and we, in a sense, like fall in love with them or their story or their situation. And it's a privilege to be able to help them. And if I have to, if prepping for a call is part of that process, then I embrace it. I like it. I enjoy it, because not only am I helping them out, I'm also helping myself out in that process as well. It's
Right.
kind of got like a, yeah, there's a twofold return on that.
Yeah. And then it's asking the right questions up front to know whether you want to prepare to do it or not. Right. You could say that, okay, if you're doing a bunch of traveling and you've got a regular client call for 2 o'clock on that day and your flight lands at 11, you're back at 12 and like maybe you'll have a shower or something. Like, how am I going to fill that time? Like, I put myself in that place. And then if I've made the commitment up front, I know I'm going to get excited about it. I'm going to do that preparation. I'm going to show up. And that in itself is the professionalism anyway. And like in any career, any situation, whatever industry it is, versus saying, you know what, like that's a vacation, and I'm really going to value that time I come back for the rest of that day just to have that time to have no commitment. And it's like, could you get there? Yes, but I don't want that's not coming away up front. I'm going to ask that client if we can move to 10 a.m. the following day or something, right? And so just being aware of that commitment you can make. And so same for you for this trip, right? It wasn't a it's Christmas and I really just need to switch off and I'm going to come back and I'm not going to do have any calls that day. It's a hey, look, it's an extra, it's a bonus. I want to go do our trip that I love with the guys and then come back. I want to rock it with a few clients as well. That intention, that commitment, I
Yeah,
think that feels good.
and it feels naturally. It feels flowy to me. So that, I think that's how we know there's a sweet spot to it.
Yeah, yeah. And then talk about how you felt at the beginning of your coaching journey to where it is now. There's just so many more reps of evidence that you have that no matter what happens once you get in a call, you're going to show up for them and for yourself anyway. I mean, think about the amount of coaching sessions that you've held, and there's so many things that have just happened every single time. But think how many you'd have to go the other way to have a new belief that would take you into a place that you didn't want to be. One of mine is always
Mm.
that whatever I say is the right thing in the moment, and that's like a very sneaky belief because it can't be like it's only useful. I don't see any downside of that. And it's something like, well, I never know what we're going to get to, but I know that we're always going to get there. So that allows for the flowy nature of the call, and whatever happens,
Mm.
happens. And again,
Right.
that's always been the case. And every single call I've ever got to, it's been, well, there's something to take away from it, right? There's some piece of value that the client's got, even if it's a tiny, tiny little thing. There's always something. I've never had it that someone's left a call and been worse off before they started.
Yeah.
We just got so much evidence of that, right? And so there's, those things are helpful to have extra awareness of, and just go no matter what, wherever I've been. Just like you can have come back and have evidence today that it feels that that's in that flowy state, but you now know that next time you got the boys' golf trip, that if you want to come back and do some of those calls, it's going to work because you've got evidence of that.
Yeah. 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 Evidence is key, but so is believing in it before the evidence is there. Yeah, I think I don't know. I think of it as like calibration time, right? Once a week we connect and we calibrate, because you might not think about some of the coaching principles or things we espouse in our connections between our time. Although that's certainly how you make the most progress, in my opinion, is to keep these principles front and center. But life happens, right? Things happen. We get distracted. We get pulled in different directions. And oh yeah, I forgot about this thing. Or oh yeah, this is good to practice. Or oh yeah, this is top of mind for me now. Let's talk more about this.
Yeah,
And inevitably, no matter where we start, like you say, we make progress in some way, shape, or form just by having the conversation, just by holding that space.
That's right.
So, that might be a good way to summarize today for me as well, with travel scheduled in the first part of the day, and still having, it's funny, I don't even think of it as confidence. I just think of it as just part of the process. Like, just show up and gonna hold the space and have a great coaching call, no matter what. There was no doubt in it, whereas maybe a couple of years ago I may have had that doubt.
Yeah,
But yeah, to your point, just holding the space and having the connection, we know that we're going to get value out of it, some way, shape, or form.
yeah. And ultimately, it's because it's not about you. Right. It's about them.
Exactly. Yes.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter. I just had the last client call I was on here was a lot going on. Most people we work with are business owners. They've got a busy life, oftentimes families, and he was just on a golf trip with his buddies as well. And it's just our busy day catching up, like just a lot of things going on. Just all it was just good to just go like back to like, okay, what am I looking at here? Looking at my dials, my most important actions. Because then I reflected for him, it's like that is the fundamental, most scary thing. And when we go over, the most important things that our most successful clients do consistently, one of the things that I will always share is that don't forget this is your golden time and or your insurance policy. So that the worst it can get is that we go out into the wilderness for a week. You'll come back. Because what can easily happen is that in that scenario, it could be like bounce off that, bounce off that. It's Labor Day next week as we record this, and then it's it's coming up to Halloween or there's someone's birthday before that, and then you're into that zone, and then you're like, and then before you know it, the only wake up call you get is New Year's Eve. What's your New Year's resolutions? Like, really didn't hit the numbers I really wanted to hit this year, and you basically wrote off a whole quarter because you just got caught up in the gravity of your day and your week, and that can happen to anyone. And
Mm.
it's we're talking about here. The examples of that I've got are already from high performance. Maybe it's not just that last quarter you wasted. Maybe it's halfway through the following year. And if it's going to be halfway through a year, it could easily be the whole year. And if you can go multiple years, you could probably go a decade. It's like
Mm.
you could go life and have nothing significant happen around you, which doesn't give you enough impetus to make a change. That might be the most scary thing. I think that's
Yeah.
why I've been thinking about, and I think about this a lot, coaches. We're working on some other stuff right now. What is the biggest thing message? I think it does come back to that time we were talking about compressing the time because our clients certainly. I don't want to speak for you, but I think it's the same. But for my clients, for sure, it's like money's important to drive outcomes. It's a tool, and there's leverage there. But ultimately, it starts to become more and more about time. How do we get things? How do we get the cycles of evolution and revolution in our business and our lives to become tighter, so we can focus on the things that are most important and create the leverage we want to take? Because you might not say I need the money, but you definitely need the time. Like I would challenge anyone to say the contrary to that.
Mm. Can I go a little deeper on that? I got questions for you.
Please.
What's the optimal way to use time? I think it's normal to, we've all been there, especially successful people. The higher that we go, the more that's demanded of us, the more time people want. So if we reverse that process, right? We have a coach who is a great coach, and we figure out how to reverse that flow and optimize our where we spend our time or how we spend our time or who we spend it with,
Yeah.
and then we have time for us. How do we spend that? Why is that something that we seek?
Why are we seeking optimization of time?
Yes.
I think it comes down to knowing there's always something we can do better. There's always something that we know we can contribute more of. We want to do. Most people, I mean, like the vast majority of people, want to be able to contribute in the world. They want to make the place. I've had two conversations today which talk about reputation is one language, the other word is legacy. I want to leave this planet knowing that this, like I wasn't just nothing happened. I went and nothing happened. That I made a difference. That people, not just people love me and my family, but there was some sort of impact I had that can be tangible. And I think that's the scary thing for a lot of people. and it's different effect to different parts of your life, and it's not just necessarily bound to how old you are. It can be there can be a corollary of it, but you could be 30 years old and scared about your legacy. And that's what it comes down to: the fear of not being able to do the things you know you could, or living up to your potential, right? And imagine dying, and then whoever your beliefs are, being faced with a version of yourself that could have been. That's a powerful visual, I believe, for a lot of people. And those are the people that I want to work with. Not for everyone, but those people I want to work with because I feel that for myself. And I know that I want to create the best I can to be able to, I don't know, optimizing time. You could say, well, you're commoditizing it. Like, that's not the point. Like, you're not trying to sell it. It's not, it's, it's going, okay, how am I spending my time? And, what I've learned, as you know, coach, has been a struggle for me is to go, sometimes optimizing time is to not do anything with it. It still makes it optimal because I can because time is not it's not a one for one relation of output, right? Like 5 minutes, 5 units of time, 5 minutes doesn't buy me something at 5 units on the other side necessarily. It's a leverage thing, just like it's value, not time or money. And so if we can, it might be the best optimal way of spending our time is to do nothing and just think, or to do nothing and not think, or just go for a walk, or just give yourself a space, or drink a cup of coffee. But it's as we know, the awareness and intention around that.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Just curious because I think that might be different for each person, but I think we ultimately come back to a similar thing. First of all, it's about like obligation. We don't want to be sucked into somebody else's time, do things that we don't want to do, and sometimes we can get that way. Even if we like the things that we do, we can be overcommitted to certain things.
Yes.
So, what is it about that we want to come back to? So, what you ended with is just space, like the ability to sit with our thoughts and be with ourselves, and that's usually where our creativity comes from.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned like legacy and like reputation and thing how we make a lasting impact here. And I think I don't know, I would consider that an upper echelon belief system. I don't know if the vast majority of the population believes that they're here for a reason, but I think the more successful people become and the more they fill up their own cup and have the ability and the privilege to do that, then you kind of realize, oh, I have this ability. Now it's incumbent upon me to give it back in some way or to contribute to a greater level. And how do we do that? We do that with time, with contributing our resources, what we're capable of in different ways. So it becomes a different game. The game changes as we progress in our success.
Yeah. And I think it's the same leverage on ourselves, but it changes what it means through that process. Like I said, it might not be. I'm not thinking about like how can I. What's the reputation I want to have the biggest legacy that I want to have necessarily if I'm 20 years old or any age necessarily, but like that's the process it would get to because it becomes a bigger and bigger game as you accomplish more and more things, whatever it means specifically for you. But the drive's still the same: is to be able to be the best version of yourself, like and feel good. Like, because no one feels good just laying around all the time. I,
Right.
I mean, I'd like to hear a counter to that, sure, but I don't know anyone that I've heard a story of like I just feel really great just sitting around doing nothing all the time. I like burning
Yeah.
12 hours a day eating potato chips and watching TV, and I genuinely think that's the most valuable thing that I can do for me, like from a selfish perspective.
Mm.
But I think it starts like that, right? What do I want? And then you start to realize that I get more things if I give up more to others, because you start to understand how the
Mm.
world works. And then it goes. Then you start
Yeah.
to be like, if I can, what happens if I can give crazy amounts to others? What do I get then? I think the most selfish thing you can do is give things to others.
Wow. Tweet that. That's interesting. It's an interesting perspective. And I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, uh, maybe more, young Josh as a teenager might not have understood that, but I understand. I'm with you now on that.
Yeah.
I think it's very true.
Well,
So that's another component of this, some life experience and, seeing some things and experiencing some ups and downs and your career personally. It leads us here. And what are we trying to do? Trying to optimize everything in our lives to get the best of everything that we can experience. So why? I think you hit on this too. It comes back to the way that we feel. Feel it feels good to contribute and to give to others, and therefore that's why you're saying it's selfish. But maybe we remove the belief system that selfish is a bad thing.
Right. And it's a play on words to have a hook to get some leverage, right, on people. But it's what makes the world go round, right? It's always got to be all the wins. Have your cake and eat it too. It shouldn't be I got to like lay on the sword so you can have a nice day, right? It should be that we could do that together and everyone wins. Like
Mm.
we make trades on the things we do, but it doesn't have to be sacrifices.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good takeaway right
All
there.
right. Well, let's do that then,
Trades
coach.
make trades on the things we do, but not necessarily sacrifices.
Yeah. I think I might have to
Hmm.
quote that. I might have to give that to Essentialism by Greg McEwen. I think that's what the
Oh yeah.
distinction he makes: trades and sacrifices. Yeah, because we always get
Mm.
we've got to think about not just what we might lose. We've got to think about what we might get as well.
Mm. Love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Good place to bookmark. Anything else? Any other takeaways?
No, good stuff, Coach. Started about a couple of connections that you made and today, and so I'd perhaps like to hear about those another time as well. I think it's super important to really just keep digging in and keep at the Pro Advisor Coach podcast truth seeking.
Rocking strong, baby. We'll see you next
All
time.
right.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction, so please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links. Links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.